The lower room. It's ironic that today I've gone into psychology as a profession. As a kid, the biggest source of fear I had were stories about insane asylums and escaped mental patients. Today, I deal with psychiatric patients in psychiatric wards and hospitals. The scary world of the criminally insane that children believe in is not really true. But you never could have told me that as a pre-teenager. Now, my dad and my older brother were the types who'd like to try and scare me as much as possible. I don't think they ever truly meant me any harm. They were just the type who enjoyed scaring people late at night and thought it was normal. I remember the time my brother bought a Freddy Krueger glove and hid under my bed. Eventually, he extended the hand out underneath the bed to grab me and almost made me wet the bed. Also, there was the time we were watching the movie Child's Play, and he threw one of those My Buddy dolls at me halfway through the film. But the worst one from my brother that I can remember was when I was watching a zombie movie with my friends, and I was sitting on the couch by the window, and he reached in, grabbed my shoulders and groaned, "Brains." I screamed, jumped off the couch, and ran up the stairs in 3 strides and made it to my room. He had a good laugh over all of those, and after getting over the initial annoyance, I always had to admit they were pretty good jokes. When I was 14, my dad bought an old house out in rural Virginia. Being someone that had been used to living in more urban areas, I wasn't very pleased. I also wasn't very happy with the house itself. It was very old and somewhat unkempt. My dad was always the type who bought fixer-uppers and then never tried to actually fix them up. So it was an old house. It was likely never to end up being any better than it was when we got it. We moved in. I wasn't very familiar with the area. I asked my dad why he chose to move there. He responded that he got a really good deal on the house. When I continued to wonder why he got such a good deal on a house out in the country, he told me that no one wanted to live in that part of the county because of an old insane asylum that was kept out in the hills. People were too concerned that escaped prisoners would break into their houses and do hideous things to their families. Well, nowadays looking back, I know it was nonsense. But I was a teenager with a healthy fear of mental patients, so I believed him. I was given my choice of rooms for my bedroom. I chose an odd and windowless room that was set slightly lower than the rest of the house. I liked the fact that it had no windows. There was one set of 5 steep wooden stairs that led from the room to the main part of the house. I know this sounds like the choice some idiot in a horror movie would make. I had a valid reason for choosing it though. Without the windows, I wouldn't be in the dark, wondering who might be looking in the window at me. I could put my bed across the room from the stairs, so I could always keep an eye on the one and only way in and out of that room. An added plus was that the stairs creaked so loudly when anyone stepped on them that there was no chance that anybody could come down the stairs and surprise or try to scare me. The floor was a very old hardwood that also creaked so loudly that no matter how softly you walked on them, you could not walk quietly. I would always know that my brother or my dad were coming down the stairs to try and scare me. Yeah, you're probably thinking I'm a wuss. Well, I'd rather be an overly cautious and living wuss Then the idiot who hears a noise in the next room goes to investigate it, only to be killed by Michael Myers. Actually, though, it was less of a matter of protecting myself from mental patients, and more of a matter of not giving my dad or brother any advantage to try and scare me. Anyone reading this who had a family member who enjoyed scaring the crap out of you, you'll definitely understand what I mean. We lived in the house for a while without any incident. My family kept up with the stories about the asylum, but they became less and less scary over time. When the nights went by without anything actually happening, I eventually came to the conclusion that the whole asylum thing was made up. Late one night in July, about 4 months after we moved into the old house, I was in my room reading a book. I tended to be up rather late, much later than the rest of my family. Finally, at about 1 o'clock in the morning, I decided to get some rest. Now, stage 1 sleep is what we call that period when you first begin drifting off. You know what I mean. It's the time when you never remember anything unless something wakes you up. It's that level of sleep when your mind begins thinking weird things that you will not remember in the morning. Well, something brought me out of stage 1 sleep. I wasn't sure what it was at first. I knew I must have heard something, but I really had no idea what it was. But then I heard it again. It was a creaking noise. It was a very distinct creak, like one would hear as if someone were walking down some old wooden stairs. My heart felt like it stopped. For a moment, it actually felt like it paused, as a million things rushed through my head, and my first instinct was to turn on the lamp by my bed right away. The sound was coming from the stairs, and I figured if I could get the light on before anyone got all the way down, I'd see them. So I quickly moved my body over and flipped on the lamp right away. I also jumped out of my bed. My feet caused their own creaking as they hit the hardwood floor. I looked over at the stairs, exactly where the sound had come from. I saw nothing. I walked slowly over to the stairwell and looked up. The door was not only closed, it was also locked, just as I had left it. I paced for a while, which made the floor continue creaking. Once I had calmed down, I decided it must have just been the house settling. So I went back to bed. I wasn't necessarily relaxed when I turned the lights back off, so I didn't drift off into stage 1 sleep as quickly as I had before. About 15 minutes after I had laid back down, I opened my eyes and looked at the clock. I sighed, because I was worried I wouldn't be able to drift off again. Simultaneously with that sigh, I heard the noise again. It was the same noise, coming from the same area, and my heart began to race. I began thinking about what possibly could be happening. The noise was once again coming from the direction of the stairwell, but I hadn't heard the door open. I thought that the noise must have been coming from some other part of the house, and no one could have come down there without my noticing it. When I heard yet another creak, an unpleasant thought occurred to me. The sound seemed like it was coming from the stairs. The stairs were right by my closet door. I had checked the closet before going to bed, but if someone had entered my room the first time when I had drifted off, they might have made it into my closet before I had woken up. It had a regular swinging door. I always opened and closed it before going to bed. I heard the creak again. I flipped over again and turned the lamp on. I jumped out of my bed, making my own loud creaking sound for the second time. I figured making that noise would let anyone who was in my room or closet be completely aware that I was up. As I made my way over to the closet door, my mind created all sorts of weird and scary images. My imagination was flooded with ideas of escaped mental patients hiding in my closet, waiting for me. Now, this time, I did feel like an idiot from a horror film. Still, I knew that if I thought someone was indeed in my closet, there was no way I would get back to sleep unless I checked it out first. So, I approached the closet door slowly. I put my hand on the doorknob. I was so very convinced that I was going to open that door and see some hideous or deformed maniac sitting on the floor and looking up at me with a sick and toothless grin. My heart beat harder and harder in my chest as I held my hand on the knob. I tried to gather up all the courage I could to rival the heavy beating of my heart. Slowly, I tried to clear my head of the sickening images it was creating. I turned the knob until it clicked. I assumed it would be better to get it over with, so I flung the door open. The closet was empty. The only thing in there were my clothes and my shoes. I looked behind everything. I saw that my closet wasn't harboring some insane psychopath. So I closed the door and latched it. And then I glanced over at the door at the top of the stairwell. The door was latched and locked, just as it had been before. I walked back to my bed. I was mildly worried. I lowered myself down to my knees and looked under the bed. I felt silly, since the noise had not come from under my bed. But I had to check it anyway. It was empty as well. I got back into bed. It took longer to calm myself down this time. However, sometime around 2:15 a.m., I was finally calm again. I felt like I could try to go to sleep again. And laying back in bed, I finally drifted off. This time I slept. But I didn't sleep for long. There was another creaking sound that woke me up. I opened my eyes. I turned and looked at the clock. It was 3:15 a.m. It had been an hour since I had tried to go back to sleep. The creaking, once again, was coming from the stairwell area. My heart began beating harder and my breathing more labored. I really wondered if this time I should just pretend to be asleep. The previous times I'd hit the floor hard when I got up. I made a lot of noises, and that could have been loud enough to warn any possible intruders that I knew they were there. And perhaps that was the wrong way to go. The next noise changed my mind about pretending to be asleep. It was not a creaking noise. It was a loud hit and a cracking noise. It was so loud, it nearly caused my nervous system to jump out of my body. For the third time that night, I jumped up loudly. I turned on the light. I scanned the room, and I saw immediately what had to have been making the creaking noises. Coming out of the floor, from underneath the house and by the stairwell, the blades of what I assumed were hedge clippers were sticking out of the floor. It was as if someone were under the house and thrust them through the floor from down there, and they were moving. Faster than I'd ever moved in my life, I ran past the clippers and up the stairs in 2 lengths. I opened the door and ran to the house screaming, and my entire family all got up, and I told them what happened. I half expected them to tell me they had played a prank on me. But what I heard was another loud crack coming from the lower room. My parents called the police. Well, it might make the story complete if I told you it was a prank. Or I could tell you that there was really an insane asylum. The truth, however, was scary enough without those details. a drifter, had been in the area and decided to break into our house through the crawl space. He chose my room because there were no windows. It could have been a pantry or a shed. He got stuck there and couldn't force his way back out. He had hedge clippers with him for some reason and was trying to get himself out through the cheap and old wooden floor. Every time I jumped up, he heard the creaking of my feet on the floor, so he waited for me to go back to sleep before trying again. I could try to scare you by telling you the man was an escaped mental patient who had been wanting to torment me or kill me. Maybe he wanted to make it a torture porn or something, but I won't tell you that. It's not true. I could tell you he was just a creepy homeless guy that wanted to torture me, but I won't. What I will tell you is this. I asked my dad why the man had a pair of hedge clippers with him when he went into the crawl space. For the first time in my life, my dad did not try to scare me, and he refused to tell me why.